Going live, preparing to live stream the meeting. This meeting is being live streamed. All right, got it. Setting up your meeting for YouTube Live. Now is when I turn on my announcer voice. Done. Redirecting to YouTube. There it goes. Bye. All right, so it is streaming as we speak on YouTube. So for those of us who are in this meeting right now, that is the link that you're going to want to send around to your folks. In the meantime, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome, welcome, welcome to another edition of Café con Leche. Yes, I said Café con Leche, not Café con Leche. There have been several people who have been emailing me about the name. It is Café con Leche without the R, right? Or with the R, I should say. And with a K, that's a new development. But yes, Café con Leche is basically the Titere Poets' new podcast, video podcast, in which we are bringing in members from the community to talk about their work, to talk about what inspires them, and to have a conversation around a selection of work that we have already kind of shared out among ourselves, and to just basically kind of chill out and talk about culture, talk about art, talk about poesía. I am your host, Rich Villar. I am a Titere poet. With me also in an undisclosed location, somewhere in this location, is Mario Jose Pagan Morales. Say what's up.
Saludo, muy buenas noches. I'm excited. Bienvenidos. And yeah, let's sit around a round table, have something to drink, whatever it is. Salud, buenas noches. And let's dig a little deeper into what makes us tick as poetas and artists and everything else. So, what are you drinking, Johnny?
A green tea and something. Benjamin made it for me. I said, "Baby, make me some tea." So
nice. And who's Benjamin?
Benjamin is my youngest child, 15 years old.
Oh, that's right. Beautiful kid.
Quite a fascinating little one.
Awesome.
Cuidan a mami.
That's right.
That is so beautiful.
Cool.
So Benjamin's the youngest of 4 human beings that have birthed into this planet. Johnny Rose, since we're on the topic. Oh. And so yeah, James, Gabriel, Shuda, and Benjamin. And that's my primary position. And other than that, my other primary identity is New Rican poet. My babies and the poems and the people.
Yeah. How many years are your children apart?
So the oldest one is 26, the next one is 20, and the twins are 15.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's my little ganguita. My crew.
Oh. I only asked because like my mom had 4 kids también.
Qué rico.
Yeah. I'm the middle child. We're all like separated by like a year and a half.
Oh, that's an interesting state.
So it's just
escalerita, ting, 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 ting.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, there was a point in school where the schools were overflown for some reason in California. I grew up in California. And so at some point, all 3 of us, the oldest one, except for the baby, la bebé, all 3 of us were in the same class. We were all in 6th grade, even though we were all supposed to be in different grades. And I think that's where, like, I don't know, I really enjoy like being in classes with them. And then we got separated and I was sad.
No, that's an awesome. I'm an only child, so
stop.
So that sounds magical and exciting and fun. It's nice. So they were. What were their names? What are your siblings' names?
My sister. Well, no, their names is their nicknames are Mimi. Mimi is oldest, and then it's me, and then it's Crystal or Cristal, and then it's Kim. Or Kimberly, or we call her la bebé. We call her la bebé. She's also the shortest one, so
yes. So she's the baby.
She's really the baby. She's really the baby. How was it? Yeah, how was it being an only child?
It was interesting. It was me and books. You know, it really was me and books, and I was a bookish child, and my music and my bedroom. I could be locked up in my room for 4 hours or 8 hours and read a whole book. And my mom, like, I'd go in there with a book this big, and my mom be like, "Iraida, tú estás bien?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm good." I would come out to eat, go back in my room, go to the bathroom, go back home, and there was like silence. Because sometimes I didn't, you know, at that stage, like most of the music we heard had like a lot of like beat and riff and lyrics. Like, you know, I'm listening to like Michael Jackson and Cyndi Lauper and Madonna's True Blue album. My father took me to buy 4 albums, and so it was too much noise to read with my books. So when I would read my books, it was like,
wow,
4 hours. Like, you don't have that when you have a whole bunch of kids in the house.
That's
so that's what it was like.
That's true. You know what? I love that. I love how books like were able to take us on a journey for such a long time. 3 hours, 4 hours. Sometimes, I mean, I think the first time I picked up a book was in the 8th grade, like intentionally, because I kept moving schools, and all of the schools that I went to had the smallest libraries, the smallest. And then eventually when I did go to 8th grade, and then I had a teacher who was like, every day we're going to read after recess, cool down. And then I picked up the book and I was like, wow, I didn't even know words could sound like music or like water.
What book was it?
It was Incantation by Alice Huffman. And yeah, I don't know. I really fell in love with words.
As all the participants simultaneously go to Google.
I have my notebook open so that as we're talking, I'm totally going to be like, Incantation, Alice Huffman.
Yeah, estaba buenísimo el libro. And
how did you relate to it?
Me? How did I relate to it? Well, because I was also during a time where I was questioning my sexuality, you know, I was like, what am I? And then she writes about her best friend. She writes about her best friend, how her best friend's voice sounded like water. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, how would you describe someone's voice like that? And then I got excited thinking I could describe people like that, you know, or people's, the way that they make me feel. And at the time, you know, and I also believe that we could fall in love multiple times. And so my teacher, I feel that I fell in love with her like platonically. And of course, I call her my mom now, you know, but she was like this, like this force, this inspiration in my life. And I would write her poems. And then I don't know, I just thought that was a way of expressing. And then when I was mad at my sisters, I would write them poems as well.
Oh my God, angry poems. Go ahead with that.
So you would write to people you were mad at, and you would write to people who inspired you, and they were usually either in your family or close to you.
I love that.
As far as a teacher, that's an amazing way to see the world.
Absolutely.
You know, through the language. That's dope.
Yeah. So that's
Bueno, if it's cool, you know, I think I would like for one of you, you know, it doesn't matter who, to you know, kind of open us up with one of your poems, either one that, you know, inspired you to write, or one that you submitted to us. And you know, let's get into some of that discussion too, if you want to. It's up to you, who wants to go first.
If I can make a suggestion, if I may.
You can.
If you can open with the poem that inspired you, because I think that's the foundation, right? Of everything else. So that would be awesome.
Or you could do that.
Yes.
That sounds good to me. All right. Don't everybody jump at once.
Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
I always wait a beat, and then I'm like, if there's silence and they say vamos a hacerlo, I'm gonna do it. Nothing to do but say yes, right? Let's just always say yes. And the universe says, go ahead and get in my poem. All right. No intros. Read the fucking poem.
Read the poem.
What was said to the rose. What was said to the rose that made it open was said to me here in my chest. Was told the cypress that made it strong and straight. What was whispered the jasmine, so it is what it is. Whatever made sugarcane sweet, whatever was said to the inhabitants of the town of Shigil in Turkestan that makes them so handsome. Whatever lets the pomegranate flower blush like a human face, that is being said to me now. I blush. Whatever put eloquence in language, that's happening here. The great warehouse doors open. I feel gratitude, chewing a piece of sugar cane in love with the one to whom every that belongs. Rumi.
Maya. So when did you come across that poem for the first time?
I was around 17, and it was when I was doing the New York Poets Cafe. When I first read at the New York Poets Cafe with a girl named Nazarene, and some other writers that I met at the writers workshop at the New School at Eugene Lang in the summer of '93 when my father was dying. And mommy decided that I was going to go do some workshops to keep me entertained. And somebody found, I think they mailed it to my house, the New School, because I was a writer. And I'm 17 years old and this is going down. And mommy was like, let's give you something to distract you, because all I did was like go to the hospital and like put on my beauty pageant dress and wave. And I went to the hospital in that dress. Like there was so much going on at that time. Like I got off a parade float and walked into my father's hospital room with the crown and the dress still on, you know. And so then after all of that experience, I needed something to like anchor me, ground me, to make me to pull me into what I love. And so my mom, in her infinite wisdom in that area, she put me in these writers workshop at the New School, and we read all these poems. And there was a conversation where one of the facilitators said, the rose is not the poem. The poem is the essence of the rose.
Wow.
Well, okay. Who was this teacher?
I don't remember, but I still have I have the notes, I have the notebook, and I have it written down.
The essence of the teacher still there.
Yeah, but I don't remember the name, because what's in a name, right?
Yeah, I got it. Wow, that's deep.
So it was dope. It was dope. And I read the poem and it opened me up, and I was like, you know what? This is the kind of shit, like that's the inspiration, right? That's the muse. That's rasa. Rasa is a word that Carmen Valentin, they used to have rasa parties, and it's R-A-S-A, and it's a word in Sanskrit that it's the word that you feel when you're beholding that beautiful, the essence of art and creativity, and that music, the vibe that makes the mosh pit feel like church. So that's Trasa. And I felt like that poem was about that. And you don't see a lot of odes to the muse, to the inspiration that inspires love and creativity, and so that's why that.
So I have a question. You mentioned a dress and a crown, and you mentioned your dad being in a hospital. What was the context around the dress, and what was your dad doing in the hospital?
Well, my father was sick for a year, and I hadn't seen him for the whole year. And I was like, what's going on? And he was a hunter. So we thought he had Lyme's disease. And so and this is the summer before my senior year. So I was still 16 at the time, actually. This is the summer before my senior year. And we're sitting in the car. This is the April. Yeah, this is April, July. And we're sitting in the car, and my stepmom's like, well, we're going to go upstairs now, see him. I haven't seen him in a whole year because he was trying to get better from this Lyme disease and he wasn't getting better. And I was like, all right, so we're going to go see him in the Veterans Hospital in Kingsbridge. So I go upstairs, and she says, well, he's going to look different. And I was like, well, why will he look different? And she's like, what do you mean? And she said, well, because the chemo. And I was like, what do you mean chemo? And she was like, well, you know what they give that for, right? And I was like, yeah. She was like, and I was like, no way. So I found out in the car outside the hospital before I went upstairs
Wow.
that he was going to be completely transformed when I got up there. And I was like, so at that point, I really thought, it was like April. And at that point, I thought that I was going to see him be himself again, right? And my God, this man has to survive brain. Like, oh, well, now that I'm here, it'll all be better. And I was just like, well, we just got to heal my dad again. And I even brought a picture to them because I felt like they were treating the illness and not my father. And I was like, I understand you have to kind of be a certain way to survive this, but I brought him a picture of them. And I was like, can you keep this on your desk so that you can always remember that this is the guy that you're treating in there? And what you're looking at when you walk in there is illness, but this is the man that's sitting in that bed. And they were like, my God, he's so handsome. And I was like, please treat him the way you would treat him if he still looked like this.
Wow.
Because if he still looked like this, you would have been really taken care. But they were very they would come in and move him and turn him. And I was just like so clinical. And I was like, I know you have to kind of do that.
Yeah.
But that's where my brain was. That's the experience that I was having. And I was just like, okay, my mom was just like, this is madness. I had to remind people that my father was still a human being, not this, wizened version of that. So my mom, like I said, like the best thing she could have done was put me in that space. I also had won a beauty pageant at that time. So I was in the Puerto Rican Day Parade and I was like one of the reinas. And so I was like, when I got off the float in the Puerto Rican Day Parade on Fifth Avenue and in the Grand Concourse. And when I got off the float, I just, my big dress, my crown, all my stuff. And I would go to the hospital to cheer him up like that. Like, hi, Papi. And all the nurses would be like, here's what? And he'd be like, my baby's a princess. And I was like, hi, Papi. He was like, you're so beautiful.
So in the midst of all of this, your mom sent you to the new school to do poems.
So that she knew that was going to be the medicine.
Interesting. So I just have one more question before we turn it over to Catherine. Like, how do you feel like the entrance to, like, you had this entrance into this transformation of your dad, right? Which was kind of foisted on you. And at the same time, you had this entrance into this world of poetry where somebody's going to explain to you about how the poem is not the rose, but the essence of the rose. And I hear this phraseology about you're not treating the illness, you're treating this person, right? So how much do you think that initial sort of feeling of needing to explain who your dad is to somebody maybe played into your poems? Do you think it played into it at all? Or how did that experience sort of, push you forward into these initial forays into poetry?
It's funny because my favorite book there was some foreshadowing. My favorite book was The House on Mango Street. And in that book, and it's funny because I thought about it when we were talking, Catherine, about your book, right? So my book, at that age, I was 13 and I read The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. And and there was one chapter where she talked about her name was Esperanza, and she sounded, the way that they said it sounded like a spoon clattering to the ground, to the floor. And I was like, Esperanza, like it sounded like a spoon just clunking around. And that was the inspiration for What's in a Name. So that book was very informative about what it was that I was going to be doing and how I was going to be processing. And there was one point where she describes her father hunched over in pain because his father died. And the conversation about the paternal mortality. And I wrote in my book, like, Papi, please don't die, or something like that. So, and I was 13 when I wrote that. So the fact that so soon, I felt like something walk over my grave, and I was like, he's gonna die. I know what's gonna happen. So then when it was happening, I clung to that book and to the writing and to the poetry and to the expression, because I connected that. I remember thinking about it and being like, and then reading the book to kind of like process that out. Yeah. So that's how, like that. That's how that worked out. Um, and it all came together. So, you know, Nazarene said, let's go to the New Eureka. And we went, and it felt like home, and it was an incredible experience. And then, you know, I didn't go in like at the New Eureka heavily then, because I was still like a hood chick in the Bronx. And I really was. When I say I really was, I really was. And I didn't really see a future for myself in anything. I thought I was going to die at 18 anyway. I was pretty sure I wasn't going to die. I mean, I was going to live a long time. I was like pretty sure. Like I really did. And it was in my writing that I felt that 18 was it for me. And so I didn't think much past that. And so by the time I was 19, I became a mom. Like, oops, I'm a mom. And my son was like, the new plan. So I never became like heavily in the scene. I never got a chance to do all the things and do the open mics and I didn't do any of that. I went back in my 20s and was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go visit and do it, spit a piece. And then in my 30s, when my kids were like big and I was getting divorced, I said, well, it's time. And I joined the Acentos Writers Workshop, and I read at Capicu. Santiago was like, yo, go read it at the Capicu Culture open mic. And I was like, all right, cool. And that was, you know, Acentos and Capicu was like my entrance back into our community and our tribe.
You know, it's funny. It's funny. I've known Johnny. I've known you for years, right? Literal years. And I've heard I've heard the stories about you know, your entry into poetry before, and somewhat into the scene, but never did I hear them integrated like that. And I think it's very interesting how there was, you know, that sort of intersection between, you know, all these different things that were happening between the ages of 17 and 19. And then that's kind of like the entry into poetry, and then it kind of gets paused. And then here you are at these other in these other spaces. All of that together makes a picture that I hadn't known before, even though I've known you for all these years. So thank you for that. Let's put a pin in that for a second and come back to it. But I want to go to Catherine and ask you to read your inspirational poem. And let's hear a little bit about your first forays into poetry and writing.
First of all, thank you for sharing everything you just shared. Porque, like, I was like holding back tears. I mean, I still am, you know, because I don't know. I'm the kind of person that feels very deeply, and everything you just shared is so real. And I just want to extend all my love to you and to 17-year-old you, 20-year-old you, you know, and like all the versions of you that led up to this moment for us to be here, you know, and such beautiful storytelling. We gotta get some cafe. Girl, we could talk for hours.
Can't wait.
Yes. So this like inspo is actually from the book I was just telling y'all about. At the time, I had no idea that this would have an impact on me the way that it like I now keep going back to it. And I think that this piece of writing has grown with me. So it goes, if every life is a river, then it's little wonder that we do not even notice the changes that occur until we are far out in the darkest sea. One day you look around and nothing is familiar, not even your own face. My name once meant daughter, granddaughter, friend, sister, beloved. Now those words mean only what their letters spell out. Star in the sky, truth in darkness. I have crossed over to a place where I never thought I'd be. I am someone I would have never imagined. A secret, a dream. I am this body and soul. Burn me, drown me, tell me lies. I will still be who I am. When I tell you this has grown with me, It has grown with me, all versions of me, even in the version of me where I didn't even, I didn't necessarily feel comfortable with the language of daughter or sister. I didn't know what that meant, and now I do. It's so interesting how that has transformed for me. But I love that, you know, I love the burn me, drown me, tell me lies, I will still be who I am, because it's true. Like, the world may, or society may do all of these things to shred me, remove me from who I am, but at the end of the day, I will still be who I am. Even all the different versions of who I was and who I will be. So yeah, that one, I see every year. I feel every time I come back to that piece, it's different, or like there's more layers, there's more depth. There's, you know, when the tree has little, like, I don't know, they say you can tell how a tree is like how old they are by the little lines. That's that poem for me. Yeah, and it's just growing, it's expanding, and each year is different, or each year there's another layer and it's bigger, and it all means the same, but now it has just more meaning, more depth. Yeah.
How old were you when you first came across that piece of writing?
I was 11.
Wow.
I was 11 years old. Yeah.
And did you start writing right away? Was that the immediate reaction is I just need to pick up this pen and go
Yeah.
to
I
work?
mean, I became so obsessed with that book. I mean, I became so, I mean, it was like I really looked forward to recess and after recess so that I could read and so that I could learn more about what was being said. And I remember just putting every single time putting like a little bookmark or folding the page at the corner. And I was like, oh, but I don't want to make it ugly. But I was like, it's not even mine, it's the library's. But I just remember thinking this book is very special, and I'm so happy that I picked it up. It's as if, I don't know, era el destino, like, you know, I needed to be at that school in that year to meet
Yeah.
that teacher, to have gone in that library, to have seen that book pop up. Like, I guess I needed to just be in that moment, or I guess in this lifetime I needed to be there. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing this piece because
Mhm.
I've been reading it a lot because the first part of it, from If Every Life is a River to One Day You'll Look Around and Nothing is Familiar, Not Even Your Face, that really resonated with me. You know, we take whatever journey you're on, there's a moment that you reach where, you know, you look back and you're like, or even look in the mirror and say to yourself, well, hold on a second, who is this person I'm looking, like, I don't recognize you,
Mm,
right? So
right.
thank you for sharing that, because I went back and I looked up some of her work and I was like, I need to read more about this, right? And then, you know, the punch in the stomach for me is I will still be who I am. You know, beside, you know, it doesn't matter what we're labeled, you know, mother, sister, father, brother, tia, abuela, poet, actor, activist. You know, at the end of the day, you know, I still will be who I am.
Mm.
So I want to ask you, who is Catherine Benitez?
Yeah, just that's the punch.
It's a small question. It's a really, you know, just a small.
So for a little feedback, and a little history,
Yes.
I met Catherine at a Spanglish open mic in Staten Island, and usually a friend of mine called me un huevo salado, un huevo sin sal, because I walk into a space and I'm not really like, hey, how are you? ¿Cómo estamos? Salud. I'm very quiet. I'm in the background. And I had seen Catherine read and I was like, okay, let me break out of the shyness and say hi to this amazing artist. And that's how we met. Then I invited her to Great Weather for Media. And we have had the pleasure of breaking bread and being in space a couple of times. So that's how I met Catherine. And then I found some amazing information about her. So, you know, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you bees?
Who I be? Oh my gosh. I often sometimes I refer myself as I come from the land or I come from the moon. Like I'm with the stars. Pero yes, Mario, I remember when we met, it was a lot of like a lot of energies that day. And it took a minute for me to get to Staten Island because I didn't know how to navigate. That was like my first time heading out there.
None of
And
us know. It's all good.
No.
Even the ones that are born here.
And I literally live like 15 minutes away, and I still don't know.
it's something to like get there, right? Pero bueno, I was supposed to meet you. I was supposed to meet all of y'all. And yeah, so usually, when I perform, I kind of just like really sometimes just focus in that moment who I am, and sometimes I forget who I am. Or sometimes I go into spaces and I have to forget who I am in order to perform my work, or I have to remove myself from or detach myself from the audience because I'm like, oh, the audience probably won't understand this. Or because I write from a very deep place, a lived experience. And I guess that's kind of like who I am as a person. So who I am is someone who feels very deeply, and I care so much, and I love deeply. I fall in love many times, with strangers, with birds, with trees, with the sky, like everything, the land, the dirt, the mud. Yo me enamoro rápido, I'm like, I need to write this down, and yes.
That's the life of a poet, though. No, I'm the same way. I
Yeah.
am the very same way. I
relate.
fall. Yeah, listen. I fall in love with the Corona bottles by the pump outside my house. I fall in love with the 2 wine bottles up in Diker Heights on a corner that some people left. I fall in love with everything. It's the curse of being a poet and feeling deeply, and listen, like I'm with you there. Like I take everything in, and sometimes it's a little too much.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the life of being a writer and being an artist and being human, and sometimes it's a curse, and sometimes I wish everybody felt that way.
I know.
Because there's a lot that people are missing when, listen, I fall in love with the train tracks. Like it's just the way it is sometimes, so yeah, I'm with you there. I think we all are.
Yeah.
I think
And I
so
love that.
too. Yeah. I think for me it's people miss a lot by I think that the world, in a sense, um I think that sometimes living in a city will
Mm,
kind of put you on edge right away and kind of just
yeah.
everybody says, well, not everybody, but there's a maxim that says one must proceed at the pace of trust, right? And it's hard to do that when everybody is a quick flash in the eye, and everybody is kind of in a hurry, and it's really easy to distrust, yes, but also
Mm,
to just kind of like hate somebody. It's easier to do that than it is to really have love as a default option.
right.
And that's the thing. I think that a lot of poets are in that same boat where we have decided, we've made the conscious decision to go to love first, and it's really difficult because the whole planet is kind of aligned to dissuade us from that. And
Yeah.
so that's a very beautiful way of looking at the world. And I just wanted to, before we go on to another poem, I wanted to pose a question to the two of you, because you touched on, Catherine, this whole idea of one's essential self, right? And what one has to kind of put aside in order to present this, the work, the poetry or plays or whatever it is in front of you, right? But particularly in performance, when you are sort of naked in front of an audience. But also too, I think sometimes in the academic context, or in this thing called, the poetry world or the scene, as it were,
Right.
I have we all have this mutual friend who is no longer with us, who talked about this in an essay in which he had discussed the face that you have for one set of people and the face that you have for somebody else. And so my question to y'all is, you know, how do you manage and how do you kind of go around this whole, you know, this whole idea of multiple selves? There is your public writing self, and then there is this private creator self. And do you feel like those two places are merging indeed, that with that one, you know, with that one idea of, you know, at the end of it all, I'm still who I am, right? Do you feel like there's something that is lost in translation, or do you feel like you are representing yourself as truly as you can when you present in front of, say, an audience, or for someone who might be trying to hire you, right, for a position or give you grant money or whatever the case may be? Talk to us about that. And whoever wants to go first can go first.
Go, Jenny.
My turn.
Yes,
So try as I might to be different people in different places and take on different characters and roles, and for the most part I can be a little more serious here and stoic, or a little more gregarious here, but overall and in general I've found that I find life most satisfying when I'm being all of myself everywhere that I am, and letting it all fall into place, because I belong wherever I belong, being myself. And if I don't belong there because I'm not putting on something else while I'm in that space, I do not belong there. It is not for me. So in that, I have found that that's not an easy journey and road to travel, because everybody doesn't vibe with that well. But in workspaces, I find that and so far, I find that I'm at the crux, right? At a transitional phase where I'm at the crossroads where I can honestly say that as I approach 50 years old, what Oprah and Maya Angelou have told us is very, very true. The older I get, the less I give a fuck about people's opinions about what I'm doing when it comes from a genuine place, and when it comes from an excited, pure, loving place. Like there's so much that we're supposed to do, that we're supposed to put on. And we can do that, but not with the people that we love most, not with the people that are genuinely supposed to love us as who we are. So I want to be that person in all the spaces. So I am that as a parent coordinator at a high school in the Bronx, right? I bring the moms to the table. I bring the educator to the table. And when so I try to bring the parts of myself that I know well into all those other spaces and places, and hope for the best. I'm not the greatest business person when it comes to like my poetry and all of these things. I'm a poet because I'm a poet, not because I'm in the business of poetry. And I think that that's one of the things that it confounds them about me and kind of frustrates them about me. I am in the business of raising these kids that I dedicated my life to, trying to survive trauma, mental illness, being a Puerto Rican woman in the Bronx that doesn't make enough money working for the government, and, speaking up for the rights of Black and Brown people across the United States in the communities that I'm from, and just developing the Gay Straight Alliance at my school, and doing the yearbook with the kids and learning how to make a newsletter with them. And like, that's my stuff. That's my work. That's the work, right? We're talking about all this stuff and it's great. But really what I'm doing, it's so rewarding, but it's also so exhausting. So I haven't gotten myself to a place where I could give myself to my writing and my work and the grant writing and the, but I'm blessed by having people in the community that do all these things. And every once in a while they'd be like, Johnny, ven a hacer esto y esto y and it all comes together beautifully. And I feel very blessed by people that create those connections for me and, put me on and allow me to exist in those spaces. And for a very long time, I created that for people as well, right? Like I created a lot of platforms and opportunities for people, but like you take turns, you move, you people, you know, this one comes up and you recede in the back and you work in the groundwork for whatever your next launch is going to be. And the people that hold you down are going to understand it. It's sometimes you're writing, sometimes you're healing, sometimes you're building, and sometimes you're creating platforms, but there has to be like a cyclical process, because you can't be all of those things all of the time. So, you know, it's and finding community that knows that and you can work with to create that so that you can all take turns taking care of the different parts. That's where you really grow. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so proud of my brothers, because y'all are doing it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you're really doing some incredible work, and, you know, just being ourselves and doing what we love and are passionate about and connecting with other people that and souls. And I'm really excited about like where we are in terms of like doing the work, right? I feel I'm capable of doing a lot more now than I was before. I've let go a lot of the fear and the imposter syndrome, and, you know, and I'm almost at the place where like I don't have to be exhausted anymore. I'm ready to like really give myself to the work, and the writing is growing, and I'm very grateful that you're all growing at it in different places that are allowing us to connect. Catherine, it was so amazing to meet you at the New Weekend at Mario's beautiful book release, and to spend and share time with you, Rich, recently. Like, we've all been in each other's spaces and places and energies, and it creates opportunities for this to happen. And this is the living. I always say, you know, I don't want to grow up. I want to be a kid. I want to play. I want to make things and paint. And the artists are the kids that, you know, we're a little different and isolated and quirky, and we're figuring it out. We're still figuring it out.
Well, ya somos vecinos, so you got no excuse.
And now we're neighbors. Look at go.
And now we're actual neighbors in the Bronx. So Catherine,
Yeah.
what's tell us about your multiple faces.
Bueno, I'm gonna focus on the part where I take care of myself when I perform. I'm gonna focus on that because I feel that in order for me to do this work, I just need to check in with myself, that I am okay. Because sometimes I just really dive into this work, and then I'm an emotional open vessel as an artist, and I receive and I give. Sometimes I give, and I forget to receive. And so when I perform, yes, yes. So when I perform, I just
feel that.
Yeah. So when I perform, I just have to remind myself to breathe, to check in with my body, with my heart. I've performed work where I'm in front of an audience that I know is like probably resistant to the truth, and I just have to find ways of navigating that. And yeah, it's just a veces pasa, you know, sometimes it happens, you know, you go out into, well, at least I try to, you know, open my work from a place of truth, and sometimes the truth can be difficult to process because there's so many layers to it, right? There's history, there's lived experience, past, present, and future are present in that moment. So I just try to remind myself that I can take a step back, and that depending on the space, you know, sometimes I'm really grateful and I want to talk to everyone, but sometimes I just have to leave, or I have to go to the bathroom, and I just, yeah. And I know that sometimes for some folks, you know, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I think she was mentioning, oh my gosh, like that was so cool. And I was like, I just want to leave. Like, I just, like my heart's exposed, and I just want to like go take care of it first, and then I'll come back and talk to everyone else. And I remember that was my first realization. I think it was like probably like pre-pandemic, where I realized that's what I'm doing. I'm taking care of myself. I'm tending to this whole body. In order for me to do this work, I just really need to take care of it. So yeah, so depending on the audience, I just really take care of myself. And sometimes I'm ready, like right after I'm done performing that last piece, I'm ready, hey y'all. And then sometimes I just have to leave for a second and, you know, recenter myself and then come back. Mm-hmm.
If I may.
Yeah.
I think you guys are gonna laugh. Well, Johnny and Rich are gonna laugh about this. You know, I met Johnny and Rich not at Capital culture, but at a writing workshop that Johnny was very, very hands-on with. It was her baby, School of Poetic Arts. And we had a facilitator by the name of Anthony Morales, if I'm not mistaken. Right, Anthony? Shout out to Anthony. And he had this philosophy, and he used to get on me about it. I remember he used to pull me to the side, and once upon a time before Johnny told me the importance of a name, right? Which is the reason why I call myself Mario Jose Pagan Morales, because I had to take control of that and make it mine. But once upon a time, I used to be called Ponce, and I remember Anthony would tell me, he would get on me because I would read my pieces, which are very Spanglish at the time, and translate them completely. And he would be like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to get a little Titere right now. I don't give a fuck. If you don't understand what I'm saying, that's on you. I'm going to spit it however I'm going to spit it. So we have two really powerful culturas here. We have Puerto Rico and, correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine, because I don't want to say the wrong thing, Mexico, right? How important is that to your work? And when we get on the mic, do we feel like we can't be Mexican enough, or we can't be Boricua enough in these spaces porque they're not going to get it? I just came from, I text Rich, and I was like, I'm in Gringolandia, and they better get a dictionary. Because I was not going to modify what I was about to read. That's on you. So how important is that for you guys in your work? Because I've heard Catherine read, and I've known Johnny for years, and I know exactly where she's coming from. So how important is that to you guys when you get into a space? Because I think, Catherine, you touch on being in a space where we're not sure if they're going to get it, or it might be a little hostile. I've had people come up to me and say, your work sounds really beautiful, but I wish you read more in English. Mm-hmm. And I would say, if you have any questions, you can come speak to me and I could explain things to you. But maybe you should learn Spanish just like I learned English. So how important is that to you?
Wow. I recently performed at a space where I was doing my poetry, bilingual, because that's how I write. Así me salen las palabras. And I was told, wow, you just really opened my mind to bringing in a different community into the space, because we don't have that right here. And I was like, yes, and yes, yes, but also, why didn't you do more outreach if that was the case? You knew I was coming, but at the same time, I was like, it's okay, because I think we're all growing, and I think we're all heading towards a place where we're now listening a little bit more. But I feel that for me, I think it should come from a place of intention. If you're inviting a poet into the space, a poet that writes like their truth a certain way, but also like, I don't want to feel that I have to compromise who I am for anybody in the space. But I am proud of I think that when I perform unapologetically. And then I take a moment to sit back and realize and analyze everything that had just occurred. I'm like, eso lo que pasó, that's what happened. And I'm like, oh, okay. Next time I'll do better, or next time I'll fix it, or, things like that. Or next time I'll try to, I don't know, navigate the space differently. But I do that with intention, so that the future generation of poets won't have to experience that sort of like resistance or distance, I hope that later on it's like a call and response relationship amongst the audience, regardless of who's in the space. But I do take ownership. Like, I'm like, yes, I'm unapologetic. This is my work. I'm proud of my work. But then sometimes after I'm done performing, I do sit back and I'm like, there's still some work to do. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to speak my truth, because I will, but it does allow me to sit back and reflect. I'm like, what can we do better as a society, as people?
And to speak your truth in the way that your truth sounds, because your truth sounds a very specific way, because it comes from you. And it comes from your people, and it comes from your spirit and your ancestors, and it's going to come out the way that your muse wants it to come out, and not the way that the audience needs it. And the audience will connect with the universal spirit, the human spirit, the human aspect, and they'll be edified and fascinated by the curiosities that are different. And that entices for more, for a lot of people that, it's beautiful to enjoy the richness of another person's essence and spirit and culture and community through them, right? As translated through this shell. But at the end of the day, I remember thinking as a little girl that, I read Little House on the Prairie, Laura Ingalls Wilder books. I read those books. I loved that stuff. Loved it. I had the entire Nancy Drew collection. I read Sweet Valley High. I read The Babysitter's Club and all that. Well, that was a little younger. I read that with my little cousins. But I read things that it was like the equivalent of watching like the movies about big high schools in the Midwest, where it was like, it was interesting and it fascinated me, but I couldn't relate. And I didn't think that my voice mattered because my voice didn't have horses and ponies and mansions and things in them. And I was like, nobody's gonna want to hear about this. Nobody's gonna care. Nobody's gonna want to hear about this stuff. What am I gonna write about? Which is why the House on My Industry was so important, because I was 13 years old sitting there going like, oh my God, crying. And I remember thinking, I can see a little girl in Iowa who knows nothing about us still being able to relate to the loneliness that I felt and the pain that I felt being an only child and going through things, right? Because no matter what, cultura, si raza, si whatever, there's good and bad in every race and culture, and there's amazing blessings in how families love one another. So people would understand the good, the bad, and the ugly, no matter what how the food tasted and what the music sounded like and the colors and the clothings and all of that. At the end of the day, those are just like the accoutrement of the human spirit. It's just what we decorate ourselves with to express what our spirit sounds like. But it's not us, the flesh. And the reason why it complicates it so much is because we go into these spaces and we have these people that still have all these very distinct white supremacist attitudes toward other and want to just other us, no matter how connected to the lands you are. They will constantly tell you that you are different, and I'm different than what? Than you. I'm like I'm not other because I'm not you. I'm not different because I'm not like you. You're different. How about that? You're different. Y'all different. So when one of the examples when we did the Barnes and Noble event, it was beautiful. We read at Barnes and Noble. I brought my crew. I brought the class. We had a heater. We had, there was that we had a few really fun class trips. And so we went to Barnes and Noble and I read my poem, my signature piece about my actual signature, about my name. And this woman approaches us, and here we are standing amongst the books and the people, schmoozing and chit-chatting. And these two Upper East Side biddies, like, it was wonderful, it's fascinating, it's beautiful, but it was a little hard to understand everything you said. And it's like, it was a little hard to understand. Yeah, I said, yeah, I pepper my work is sprinkle with salt and pepper of the Spanish. And I like to give my shit a little adobo. Yeah, there's some Spanish in my poetry. And
I love the accent, by the way.
I would try not to make a fucking whole caricature out of this person.
Oh, Sheila, I love it. Right.
She was like, yeah, it's a little hard to understand everything you said. And I was like, word, it's a little hard to understand everything I said. Is that right? So, because you don't have an accent, Upper East Side, New York. You don't have an accent, 15 generations from the Ellis Island. So I was like, how dare you? But I was like, you know what? It's a little hard to understand. I can understand that. You don't understand. I do a little Spanish in the work. And her response to me was, it's your accent that made it hard to understand you. And I said, what? What? And this, kiddies, is why we do what we do. I was just like, I cannot believe you actually made that happen real time with them standing there. And I just kind of looked at them and was like, Exhibit A, these are the people that we have to contend with. And they stood there like, wow, y'all say stuff like that out loud. I was like,
listen.
it was your accent that made you hard to understand you. I was like, well, I think I freaking elocute pretty well, but my bad. What?
Have you, Catherine, have you ever had an experience like that?
Oh, absolutely. During my undergrad and college, like I had an acting coach because I'm for folks that don't know, I'm also an actor, but I had an acting coach who would tell me to get rid of my accent and work on my accent. And I remember I wrote an email to the department chair and the dean. And I was like, and I remember saying that the way that I experienced that room, because it was just me in front of a whole class being given that note. I'm a freshman in college. I'm like, and I didn't even understand what that meant. And so I remember just being extremely disappointed and like it was disheartening. I was a freshman, my first semester, and I was just very excited to learn. And then to just hear that, I was like, oh, there's something wrong with me. I was 17. I was like, there's something wrong with me. Maybe I need to fix it. And then I just sent an email and then I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I don't like what I'm feeling right now because of what this professor told me. We went through this whole thing, right? But even for me right now, there's a lot of things that I'm unlearning because certain trainings and performance teach you certain things. And it's through a different lens, and it's not the lens that best serves you. So even for me right now, I'm still unlearning so much because some of these conservatories or some of these forms of training can discipline you in a certain way. And so I'm like, no, that doesn't serve me. Like, I don't need that. I don't need to change my accent. I don't need to change who I am. I am enough just as how I am in this moment and how my parents raised me, my ancestors, so all of that to say, yes, I did experience that.
So there are two things that stick out in all of these stories, and they're just something I'd like to kind of offer to y'all. Number one, there's a quote by the Cuban poet Gustavo Pérez Firmat, who in moments like this always kind of the same quote kind of comes to mind. And the quote is this: the fact that I am writing to you in English already falsifies what I wanted to tell you. My subject, how to explain to you that I don't belong to English, though I belong nowhere else. So it's not, for me, I don't read that quote as a Latino poet who is necessarily saying, I'm only writing in English and that's it. I think that there is a sort of an interruption that happens because the language that he grew up with, and the language indeed that I grew up with, and I think that all of us grew up with, which is this sort of melange of Spanish and English and everything else that comes with it, right? Indigenous language, right? Which sometimes we speak without realizing. How to explain to you that I don't belong to English, though I belong nowhere else. There's a transformation that happens when you, at least in the Nuyorican construction and Nuyorican culture, there's a transformation that happens. And it happens when we run headlong into these all white spaces, right? I don't remember if it was June Jordan who said it, or if it was Audre Lorde who said it, that said, I feel the most Black when I'm thrown against a white background, right? And there's something to that as well, right? When you run headlong into these places and you just kind of, the first reaction is, damn, I feel like shit. I feel like I don't fit in, this and that and the third. In the Nuyorican and indeed the Black arts sort of construction, The idea is that none of those standards mean shit at the end of the day, because they don't speak to who I am essentially as a human being. And then the real transformation becomes when you walk into these spaces, and Joanne Noel talks about this in the book Invisible Movement. It is the performance becomes an interruption of that power structure.
Mm.
It's the construction that says, not only do I know that I belong here, not only do I know that I belong here in my full self, my full selves as a multilingual, multicultural person, or as someone who comes from a culture that you have shit to know about. I'm going to come at you a certain way,
Yeah.
in which even if you don't get it, you have to respect it. Right. And I think that's what Algarin was doing when he would come to the mic and go, do, 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 right. And would just kind of put this, literally change the air around him by making these guttural sounds, the le le les and the ah,
He was
right, and all
giving the
these things
blessing.
that would happen.
He was blessing the space and cleansing the space.
He was
Mm.
cleansing the space and chasing away all of the negativities that we face, but also kind of putting it right in the face of those who ain't with it, and saying, that, by the way, and then just kind of like refocusing everybody. By the way, this is a singular experience to me, to this group of people. I understand that you're the dominant culture, and I understand that you don't understand it,
It's okay.
but you're gonna reckon with it, and that's just the way it goes. So with that having been said, I would be honored if y'all could offer a poem to the space, and maybe we could talk about it. We're going to go till about 9:45 ish, and
I'm having fun
we
with
can
my
talk
friends.
about the poem and talk about the line structure, whatever you want to talk about. So if you would please, Johnny Rose,
I love
let's
that.
hear a poem from you.
I love that
Yes.
that was such a clean segue, Boo Boo. That was so. Yes, Miguel Algarin's poem. Let's talk about it. Algarin's poem. From the corner of the bar, our cacique's raucous laughter bellowed, reverbed from and through, danced from glass to brick, from person to person, a symphony of creative promise. These brick walls, raw as his truth, as his love, always displayed, always infused into the telling. This stage, love, as our guttural growls and moans, ooh and ah, the words floated out and into the crowd, permeating the air they inhaled. We osmosis storytelling. They full poem after poem after poem after poem. So many poems, so many mantras. They are not with you while you scrape your insides clean to serve them on a plate. Poets removing brains from bobbing cradles, rensing, thrumming, red, viscous hearts, pulsating, prayer, shiny, slippery, sluggish, spleens slip slowly into slumber, spines limber from bending and straightening and bowing and rising, licentious livers languishing in the libidinous lull of the boiling soup, all pulled from poets' cages. Buen provecho. Put them on the table, slicing bits and oiling with the sage's delicate parts to suck and spit. Create these poems so sweet, salting, and peppering to taste. We sit feasting. And those who do not partake do not matter. And those who do not partake do not matter. Cooking is so much like writing poems. Writing poems is so much like loving eating, so much like making love. Peel the onion gut and spit them rhymes, them lines, orgasm, truth. So tasty and rich, squeeze the blood from the vein and write with the bands, that the words, your sounds, your soul, your arts fly. Ah, ah, ah. Truco, trunco, trunco, trum. Truco, trunco, trunco, trum.
Baya. I love that poem, and I hear so much of Miguel Algarin sort of aesthetic, right? Because it wasn't just, Miguel was a raconteur, there's no doubt, right? The brother was, you know, he had he had a lot of theories, and he had a lot of spontaneous sorts of things that he would say to you, and sometimes they would hit, sometimes they wouldn't hit so hotly. It was a little, he was a little much sometimes. But you know, Miguel was also one who was really, really able to articulate this aesthetic of New Eurekanism, and this aesthetic of, yeah, kind of interrupting your regularly scheduled programming in a way, right? And so, words like that, we don't necessarily see that and look at it and say, let's discuss the line structure of and ah. It is not so much a page gesture as it is simply a gesture to sort of clear the space in live performance, right? And in community, which I think we see ourselves in the New Eurekan tradition as, as kind of doing. I do notice that when I read the poem, Johnny, on paper, there is actually this sort of attempt to kind of occupy that space on the page and just kind of stretch the words out and make the reader see exactly what we're trying to, what you hear in performance, which is, I think, an interesting sort of gesture. But talk to me about this one line, because I think it speaks to the structure. It speaks to the gesture, but it also speaks to the people receiving it. This line about we osmosis storytelling, right? The words float out over the air and into the crowd, permeating the air. The inhaled we, meaning the audience, osmosis storytelling. It's an interesting word because osmosis is not the same thing in the scientific principle as sort of straight filtration. We don't necessarily get everything all at once. We get little pieces of it, and depending on how particularly porous your membrane is, that's how much you're going to get from it. That's osmosis. So talk to me about that line. What's what are you trying to kind of get us to see? Where did it come from?
I what I imagine, what I feel, it's kind of like we're trying to push in that piece, especially. I'm trying to push out of this, what I had mentioned, like this shell, like this fleshy, soft machine, so that it's just spirit and energy that is, you're just taking in our energy. And like I'm translating my love for Miguel into this feeling and this sound. And there are no words and there's no flesh. And if I can help you, if I can make a person feel who he felt like to me, then I am telling the story the right way. And you can feel him and absorb him and take him in because you're not processing words. You're just feeling it and taking it into your energy and your spirit, and your water is being moved by it. And like it just becomes elemental, it becomes part of you. And it's just like, it's just, if you're willing to take me in, if you're willing to like let this sound, because I'm loud too, right? Like I can actually you can, if I do it the right, if I do it, I can make your eardrum, you can feel the eardrum from over here. Like I can go there. So that's part of it too, with like when I'm in a space when I can really like, like I want to make you feel my voice in the back. I saw Patti LaBelle do on stage sing one time, and I felt her like her voice was like, I felt the sound waves, and I was like, wow, I want to do that. Like if I could do that, then I'm using my instrument, you know. So that's,
Yeah, it feels like an exchange of not just words but energies also, right? It kind of feels like, it was there's a video I show my students all the time about performance poetry and the particular interpretation that Ian McKellen had when he was talking about the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow speech from Macbeth. And he talked about that when acting and delivering a line is at its absolute zenith, that there is this exchange that happens that is similar to the process of him listening to a piano. There was a concert that he went to in which he said for one moment, one miraculous moment, I didn't know whether the musician was putting the music into the piano or whether the piano was putting the music into the musician. So, that to me speaks a lot to this thing about osmosis and exchange and energy exchange, and particularly in the live performance of poetry. And it gives a lot of poets agita to think that they have another job when they get in front of an audience. Like, there's a lot of poets out there that just believe that it's strictly a page art and there is no responsibility to the audience. Even if you are, the most experimental out there sort of poet, my belief is if you get in front of people, you got 300 people or 500 or 5,000 or 100,000 in the case of Pablo Neruda, who did a reading once for 100,000 people in the Czech Republic. You have a responsibility to move some motherfuckers. It's not just you sitting there reading some shit off a page, right? And Neruda was not a performer, but boy, you could hear him moving spirits with that kind of with the with the way he delivered the words and with the verb and the timbre and knowing all of the meaning behind it. He would just deliver it like, sube a nacer conmigo, mi hermano, right? There's shit like that. That's the essence of poetry to me. But so thank you for that, Johnny. Does anyone else want to make a comment about any of this stuff before we move on to Catherine's poem? Because I feel like that's the essence of what we do.
So really quick, Papo always spoke about, Papo has this, Papo Santiago.
Shout out to Papo,
shout
who
out
is
to Papo.
the founder of Kapiku Poetry Showcase.
Yeah, he has this thing he would always say at the open mic, and he would always say la sopa, which is to write about each other, right? And a lot of times we hit a wall hard, and we're trying to look for that motivation. We're looking for inspiration, and we go stagnant for a while. And have you been writing lately? And it's like, nah, son, I don't know what to write about these days. And the beautiful thing is that Johnny writes this piece in honor to Algarin. And it just shows the importance of writing about each other, and writing about how much we love each other and writing about familia. So I just wanted to touch on that, that's important. I know that recently in my work, I write about, I bring my loved ones into my writing, and I don't necessarily mention them by name, but they know who they are, and I think that's very important because and I'm gonna always go back to Johnny and Papo and Rich because they're my elders, right? Johnny used to tell me when I'd be like, I don't know what to read tonight at Kapiku. She would be like, well, it's important to remember our ancestors, and we forget that that Algarin died a couple of years ago, and and he's our ancestor now, and And we forget that these voices are important. Then there's a lot of people who haven't heard, you know, these voices. So once in a while, I would go up and I would read from the Nuyorican anthology. You know, I would read other people's voices because eso es importante. Es importante recordar a aquellos que dejaron la fundación, you know, in which we walk today as poets. You know, for us, is the Nuyorican movement. You know, for Catherine, it's a different canon. You know, and it's really important to write about, not only write about social issues and about the leaves, and if that's what you write about, you know, about Puerto Rico or about whatever it is you write about, you know, it's important to remember and write about each other, you know, and honor those ancestors. So Johnny, to you, thank you, because, you know, I met Algarin for the first time at the New York Poets Camp. At Boricua College, and I didn't know who he was at the time. And I remember he went up and they introduced him. We were at a colloquium. Johnny know what me and Johnny went to Boricua College.
That's right.
And it was a poetry night, and they introduced Algarin, and I heard he's the founder, but at the time I didn't know who he was. And he goes up to the mic, and here I am still trying to own my space in poetry, right? I would say, I'm not a poet. You know, it's too much. That word is too big for me to grab onto. And Algarin goes up, and I swear, for 3 minutes, all he did was like, can, pra, pra. And he just goes in on this tantrum. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not fucking reading after this guy. Ain't no way I'm reading after. How do I was literally physically upset, and Dr. Amina Nieves, shout out to her. She was like, ¿Qué te pasa? And I'm like, what is that? Like, my mind just exploded because I'm beginning to see the possibilities of what we could do with poetry and on the microphone. And the man didn't say a word of Spanish, didn't say a word of English. All it was he literally put a musical performance with his mouth on stage. And then I vividly remember I had to follow that. And I was like, I was completely and utterly destroyed. With that, I say it's important that we write about each other. And Yanni, thank you for this piece. It's awesome, you know.
Vaya.
Speaking of remembering our ancestors, just quick note, because she wasn't mentioned yet, and I want to make sure we do mention her. When in reference to that, when the two women whose voices I always, I had the blessing and honor of working with Seri Colon, and you know, during the decade, the last turn of the decade, and he blessed me with the opportunity to read Lolita Lebron's poetry at her memorial when she passed. I was blessed with to stand alongside La Bruja and Veronica Verdad, two beautiful New Yorker sisters that I absolutely love. And Delilah sang powerful freedom songs. It was just such a beautiful day. And we read together, and I read her poetry. And so I would read Lolita's or Julia de Burgos's poetry on the mic because they're not here, and we still need to hear their words. And so we're gonna give voice to their words. So if I can I read? I want to say happy birthday, you know, in the ether to Lolita Lebron presente. The last time I read a poem by Lolita Lebron on the mic was in the presence of our wonderful mayor, who also got to hear another piece, you know. And it felt so good to be a few feet away and say, hello, Mayor, here's some poetry by Lolita Lebron. Have you heard her lately? So that was a good time.
Did you literally say hello, Maya? Because that shit would have been funny.
Nah, but it was an interesting
Maya.
conversation. That's a whole other little snippet. This is somewhere to hit the tab down and pick a few topics within that tab. That was a good one. So, Alone by Lolita Lebron. Happy birthday, November 19th, 1919. And shout out to Las Lolitas. La quiero mucho. Alone by Lolita Lebron. I'm quiet like the still water in the solitude of my cell. I move serenely toward the sea with my stillness and my leaping alone. Only the voice of the rain can console my suffering. The rain is your voice. I feel all your kisses and embraces, the treasures yielded by the shadows and beams of light on this wall. They are my wounded and bound birds, with hollow flesh, stone-like calluses between their terrible fists, and painted mouths gagged in deafening confinement. I hear them in the field on Labor Day. What a tumult! The tired sun reaches its zenith as the cloud clears and the worn-out dream erupts in the back and forth of their laughter. They drag themselves through the furrowed dust of talk and hooch. They are the very blood and veins that run through the river of the world. They are the wounds that the powerful earth. They are the wounds that the powerful of the earth inflict. Yet we never see the decayed reflection of their guns on these walls. They are the victims of drugs who made millionaires of the pure ones, haunting skeletons of doom that shine like the gold and copper stolen from us by the Yankee colonizers.
Oh, yeah. Bueno, Catherine, would you be so kind as to share a poem with us to lead us toward our wrapping of this beautiful time?
Yeah,
Please?
of course.
Let's talk.
Please.
Yeah.
This one is called Secretos. I was willing to love you in darkness. I was willing to love you in whispers and passing when no one was watching. I was willing to love you deeply and profoundly, even in silence. Nosotras éramos un secreto, a secret held by the moon and sky. Nosotras éramos dos mujeres enamoradas a escondidas, two women whose love was alive but kept hidden and buried. We both at some point wished and desired to share our love with the world. We both dreamt that the day would be as free as everyone else. But how could we? If only it were that simple, that easy, that available, that attainable to release our truth into the world for it to hold, witness, cherish, destroy, humiliate, love, burn. Oh, but how I was willing to love you in secreto, mi corazón. Without anyone knowing, not even our parents, we'd lie in front of them and say, ella es mi amiga. What would our ancestors say to know we are forced into silence? What would our ancestors say to know our practices of love are vastly different? But one day we won't be a secret. One day we won't have to hide. One day we both of our parents will know. One day we'll be able to love unconditionally, marry each other, and visit each other on our deathbeds in the hospitals, because by then they will honor our marriage. I'll be able to kiss you and say goodbye. But until then, I'll love you in all lifetimes. And now I am willing to love you in darkness. You are my most valuable secret.
For those of us who love in corners coming and going, it reminds me of Audre Lorde. That reminds me of many poems in which you kind of get these double entendres that are working. The kind of love you speak of, I think, has been written of for thousands of years, but never really gets spoken for what it is. And I wonder, because there's a line in there about the ancestors, and how it seems, at least in the way that you construct it, that they know better than some of the voices that are here now, who would kind of like destroy a love like what you described. Can you tell us about where that line originates, and how do the ancestors know better than the ones who are here now?
I learned a lot during my undergrad. I'm a student, I'm a learner of life, and so I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to learn about the history of my queer and two-spirit ancestors. And I remember just taking this genders class, and they were talking about pre-colonization and how we were all like just like existing, um and that was before gender policing and the social constructs of sex, sexuality. And so I just think of my ancestors in the way, our ancestors in the way that they were loving without anybody telling them that it was wrong before, and that they just were just here existing. And so I could only imagine, if I could have an ancestor from then come and see what we're living in now, I think the ancestor would be like, ¿Qué pasó? Like, what happened? So that's why I just often call in the ancestor in that way. Like, what would our ancestors say to see this now? Yeah. So that's where that came from. And even then, like, I think of myself when I'm no longer here, I too will be an ancestor, and the youth will then have my words. And I hope they have them, and I hope they know that years down, when I'm no longer here, that I am one of their ancestors. Yeah.
I think for me, wow. So,
¿Qué pasó?
oh man. Well, I am the father of an amazing artist, director, singer, actress, writer. She does it all. And for me, that line, first of all, about the ancestors was everything, because to quote Josiah, in estos Estados Unidos, things are a little bit different than when we dig deeper into nuestras culturas. Things are different in other countries when it comes to gender identity. And, so, but for me, what resonated and really tugged at my heart was, to think of a world where my daughter and where my daughters, because Tati's my daughter, that's her partner, where we both dreamt of the day we be as free as everyone else. That really, like, that just really, the thought of not being able to be free as everyone else, or to be your true self, to be, who you truly are, to love who you want to love. Currently, there's a lot of legislation going around, where they're talking about not only, rewriting same-sex marriage, but also, I'm losing my place, but I'm Puerto Rican, Jen is Italian Russian, and they're also talking about that right now in Congress. So it's scary to think that we can't love the people we want to love, and to be free to as other people are, so that line really, like, messed me up when I think about Maya and Tati, and all my friends who just want to be as free as everyone else. So thank you for this poem. It's very vulnerable, and I love it, absolutely love it. So that's my 2 pennies.
Thank you. Thank you.
The quote that comes to my mind is a quote that I don't think goes far enough in the context of what we're talking about, because what you're talking about, Catherine, I think is an ancient kind of knowing. It's a knowing that came before there was a thing called Europe, before they crossed the sea, and before they decided they wanted to impose all these different values that were imposed on them. I mean, the church was not always a thing.
Yeah.
Various religions were not always a thing. There were all these different indigenous practices and indigenous cultures and languages and religions, and almost all of them recognized the existence of, I guess, what we would call in indigenous practice over here, the two-spirit, right? The idea of love being free and genderless, in fact. The
So
quote I'm thinking of is one.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The quote I'm thinking of is a quote by Milan Kundera that says that the struggle of man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. And when you're talking about thousands and thousands of years later and reclaiming something that is ancient wisdom and having it sort of ridiculed as something that is woke or modern, or you damn liberals or whatever the fuck they've decided to kind of put it in a box as, how it, we like, poets especially like to sort of talk about the poetry as a capital P, right? Poet as a sort of at least I do. I like to talk about a poet as someone who is a master status, something that you are 24/7, 365. How much of your work do you feel is literally that sort of ancient reclamation? And does it get, without sounding ridiculous, does it get tiring?
For me?
What do you think about that idea that the poet is one who is literally remembering for everyone else? Because this is it's such a small gesture, but you link it to the ancestral. All you really want to do is love someone openly.
Yeah.
But you're also calling back to something, right? So how much of that remembering happens in your work? And is it a constant?
Yeah, I feel that I've been here before, like in this world. So I feel that it is my duty to speak to what I've known or experienced before, and in such a way that is maybe artistic, but I feel that in this lifetime, that coming back into this world, into this specific life, maybe before I was, I don't know, doing something else, but in this lifetime I'm writing and I'm using my body as the vessel to just speak the truth. Yeah. But I feel that that's my, I guess, purpose. It's my, I don't see any, in this moment, I don't see another light for me to not speak the truth, or to not live in that, or to not let myself forget. I don't want to forget. And I hope to allow people to come in to remember with me. So I'm okay with it.
I think it takes me back to that space of osmosis storytelling, where it's like the flesh is, the flesh is an illusion. Like, we are not the vehicles that we're in. And we are, and time is a construct, and the ancestors were, are, and we are, and they were, and there is no past, and there is no future. There's only one, and nothing can be created or destroyed. It's all here, and we're very here. We're very present, and I would always say, I write to find the part of you that lives in me, and to find the part of you. And it goes back to, speaks to that. As different as we all are, we are the same, because we're vessels that the universe speaks to give word to an experience, and to see each other and understand each other, because it's very chaotic to live in a body that does that.
I just wanted to come back to Mario really quick, because I know you're about to make a point. What were you getting ready to say?
So Isa couldn't be with us today. She's taking care of some stuff, but she's been texting us on the Titere message, and she told me to say, "Queer love, yo, queer love." Send my snaps immediately. Yo, the anti-trans legislation fucked them southern states too. So she's with us. So she just wanted me to say that. So that's what I wanted to say. That's all.
Thank you.
Bueno, mi gente, estamos ya casi, a mí. But before we do that, if I can get each of you to just read a quick poem to close us out, I think that would be a great way to do that. And then, the conversation going to continue one way or the other. We're going to have another Café con Leche with another parent. I know that we are going to be in somebody's house at some point, talking shit and talking poems again. Catherine already knows what that's about. We was up at our boy's house and we was just acting extra, which I love. So let's close out this portion of the eternal shit talk with some poems, if you would please. Who should we start with? Do y'all have a preference or?
I want to hear the mommy poem.
Oh, mine?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, Zan, let me pull it up. Do you want to go first?
Okay.
Yeah,
Maybe Johnny can go first while Catherine pulls up the mommy poem.
Sure. All right, so I was gonna do my
First
name
Johnny, then mommy.
I was gonna do my name poem, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna do my grandmother poem. Que jodona. I just got off the phone with Abuela. She always laughs and says something to whoever's in the house with her as she's hanging up. Sometimes it's, Dito, la nena dijo que, or coño mi chula. Or she lets out a big sigh and goes, hi, as the relief that everything is okay washes over her. Iraida, todo está okay, she asks me, especially if it's been too many days between calls. Bendito, por favor, dame un ring para que yo sepa cómo está mi hija. Bendición, oración, mami. I ask for the ubiquitous blessing. I don't call her abuela. I'm the eldest cousin. All of my aunts and uncles called her mommy, so that's what I called her too. Que la Virgen te favorezca, o que Dios me la guarde. She reminds me to be careful, que tenga cuidado, que no abre la puerta a nadie porque están jolopeando a la gente. Una vez la jolopearon en el elevador a cuchillazo. A lot of her admonitions involve knives. When I was a teenager, she constantly worried about my face. Ten cuidado, que no te corten la cara. She doesn't worry about that one as much anymore. But it's unfathomable how many times I have heard, no le abre la puerta a nadie. Sometimes my hair is set on end when I wonder if it's premonition. She's happy when I'm done with work, so I call her when I'm on my way, or have safely arrived inside with the door locked. Sometimes I call after dinner because she's happy to hear that I just ate. ¿Qué cocinaste? Sí, no joda. Ay, qué linda. Sometimes when I walk into a room, she yells, ¡Esa mi princesa! Or the worst, ¡Esa! Ahí está mi preferida. It's a thing, no secret. My cousins laugh, roll their eyes. I explain to Titi between tears that I'm scared to lose her. So I create distance because when it finally happens, I wish I could go first because I don't know how I'm going to live. If it were me, impossible. She has to go first. She wouldn't survive. She lost 2 children of 6 in the few years past, pieces of her, and then 1 more. It was 6, down 3. She stood vigil, handled it like a G. I have never known a more loyal parent, a more loving gangster bitch. She walked me down the aisle. She kept me sane as a child. When my parents divorced, I was 5, sitting on the sink, screaming bloody into the mirror, watching myself die. It was late, maybe 10 p.m. She'd taken a cab to the Bronx, to Leland Avenue. She pressed little dolls with short, fluffy hair into my hands. Little keychains protruded from their heads. 38 years later, I can still remember their baby powder scent. She's the only person who's never hurt me. She's kept me sane. All my family asks of me is that I be more present. That's her joy, the joy of her life. Me, Iraida, Iri Chacon, Fundiyua. We can go make her go places if I say I'm going. My cousin's wedding, I told her I was going to do her hair and we were leaving together. She looked like Marilyn Monroe and she put her teeth in. She said, bien prosti. She still dances, hips swiveling, cursing like a construction worker if pressed. Blue jokes, nothing but a thing. See, mi mamá, her eldest daughter, tells me, saliste tu abuela. I could tell you about her for hours. Abuela, Delia, Argelia, one of 16, no twins. San Lorenzo, one of the last, 85, 86, 87 now, ticking and strong. Grew up climbing coconut trees. The Anna and her threw some at Mama, little thug girls on the island. She's still gangsta. Did I tell you she showed up at my school with a hammer? I went to an elite Manhattan private school, 80th and Central Park West. Some schools left voicemails on the answering machine saying they were going to break my fingers. The hammer was in a paper bag. She waved it around, shouted a warning. My uncle stood by to make sure all was fully understood and escorted her back to the east side a couple miles up to Wagner in the projects. She'd still fight you for me. I'd end anyone for her. I had to go to bingo one time with my cousins to give fair warning. As the Q-44 turns from West Farms to Bronx River, as she laid the phone back in its cradle, I heard her chuckle. Que jodona. How could I not be?
All right.
Oh yeah.
Bye. Hold on. Let's hear from Catherine now.
This is mommy. My favorite love poems are the ones I get to write about mommy, the ones I get to profess my love for her, the ones that get to describe her ferocious yet kind and loving spirit. You see, mommy is like no other. You see, mommy is a curandera. Sí, una mujer que cura a la gente, una mujer que le canta a los cielos, una mujer con un poder y protección fuera de este mundo. Mommy is magic, with every inch of her body embedded with healing notes of wisdom, cleanse, and strength. She is a woman who was planted on this earth to not only be a lover and a mother, but a warrior as well. To tell you the truth about mommy, she lives in the world of dreams and in the world of reality. While everyone sleeps, her spirit travels, searching for those who've crossed the living world and onto the world of flying. She searches for them and hopes to see they are okay. She's always been a healer in that way, with a deep desire to change the world, make it better through her hands, fingers, eyes, in quiet chants and whispers. Growing up, I wondered, how was she able to do that? How was she able to heal people? I can recall growing up, seeing all of her recipes laid out on the kitchen table, all of her healing herbs everywhere. Sábila, ruda, sabio, jengibre, mora, y más. ¿Cómo le haces, mami? I'd ask. She'd say, ay, mija, yo no sé, solo lo hago. And we'd laugh. I've since understood mommy is, in fact, like no other. She is like no other, like no other. And although she is my mother, I've realized she doesn't belong to me. She doesn't belong to anyone, not even to herself. She belongs to the universe. She belongs to the trees. She belongs to the earth. She belongs to everything but us. She is free, a healer, capable of existing in this lifetime and many, many more to come. And anywhere I go, I will find her. I will find her. I will find her in the sky. I will find her in the roses. I will find her in the water. I will always find her. Always, siempre.
Wow. Bueno, we ended the show with abuela and with mommy and mommy. And we could go another hour talking about mommies and abuelas and the warriors that we come from. But alas, we have reached the end of our journey, at least for this portion of it. So yeah, thank you so much for your words, Johnny, and your words, Catherine. Would you please tell our audiences where we can find you? Whether that's Instagram or Facebook or Faceagram or
Mostly on Instagram. I do have a Twitter account. I don't know what that looks like right now. Should be interesting. I gotta go visit that. Who knows? Abandoned tenements and buildings? I don't know. What's it look like over there these days? But at Johnny Rose, at Johnny_Rose_poet, on Instagram and other things, and Johnny Rose on Facebook and JohnnyRose.com, which needs some TLC and love. But yeah, I mean, I I have an insane amount of posts on Instagram. Come and read some stuff. You know, it's kind of like it's kind of like my mood board and my you know my like how I think out loud, my Instagram account. It is the work for me. It's part of the work for me. I feel like I'm gonna go through there and just like start pulling things and building something out of it. So please come on over and join me on Instagram and Facebook and be my friend. I like new friends.
Okay. Pew, pew. Yeah. You could find me just by searching my name, Catherine Baena Benitez. But yeah, my Instagram is @IMJSTLIVIN. I'm just living because I'm just living, y'all. And on Facebook, Catherine Benitez. It was so lovely to be sharing space with y'all. Thank y'all so much.
Yeah, for real.
Hermanas, I appreciate y'all so much. Let's do this again, shall we? I will catch you all on the other side. Mario, do you have a final word for us, or what's up?
I think the narrative that we've been trying to pull is, you know, this West Coast, East Coast connection that we continue to do. It just happens to be that Catherine is on the East Coast, right? So thank you for coming over here, you know, and for being close, and for opening yourself to, you know, to our community and allowing us to, you know, meet your greatness. Johnny, what can I say? Thank you for everything. I think I told Johnny this morning that the reason my book came around was because of her idea. And creating La Sopa, and you know, because that's where I sharpened my tools. That's where I met my best friend and my son's godfather. Really quick, yes, this is Café con Leche, but you know, we also speak about other projects. La Esquina Open Mic next month. We'll be bringing the West Coast, an amazing group of sisters called Las Chingonas. Will be featuring. We're still trying to figure out if we're doing Café con Leche for December or we taking a break. I don't know. That's a conversation. Maybe we come back in January.
We gotta have a little talk with the coquitos and the tree.
Well, we could do that. But most importantly, we speak about comunidad. We speak about legado. We speak about the work that Garin has been doing. That he laid the foundation for us, and all the work is being done behind closed doors. And with that, again, we'll make the announcement again that La Esquina Open Mic is coming to the New Rican Poets Cafe in January. And I'm extremely excited about that. Profe will be the first host. We rotate responsibilities. With that, I say I love you. With that, I say continue to bring open heart and open mind and peace. And los quiero mucho, bendiciones, y nos vemos pronto.
Bye, mi gente. Gracias. I have an announcement coming soon about a workshop on the Lower East Side. So y'all stay tuned for